Have you ever noticed certain people who seem to carry something that most of us don't? They walk into a room and something shifts, not because they demand attention, not because they perform enthusiasm, not because they have somehow been spared the difficulties that the rest of us navigate, but because there is a quality about them, a specific, unmistakable aliveness that seems to replenish itself from within. That does not dim when circumstances are difficult. That does not depend on the room's response to keep burning. We call these people high energy, and we tend, if we are honest about it, to assume that this quality is something they were simply born with, a temperamental gift, a fortunate inheritance of neurochemistry or circumstance, the lucky outcome of a life that has been somehow easier than average. We attribute the quality to something outside their control, which conveniently places it outside ours as well. Carl Jung had a different view, and it is worth sitting with because it is simultaneously more demanding and more hopeful than the accident of nature explanation he wrote in one of the most practically significant formulations in the history of depth psychology, that whatever is unconscious in us returns as fate, that the darkness we have not met, the fears we have not faced, the energies we have not understood and therefore cannot direct, these do not disappear simply because we have not looked at them. They operate from their position below the surface of conscious awareness, shaping our choices, our relationships, and the overall quality of our engagement with life. The genuinely high-energy people, the ones who seem to carry an inner sun that the ordinary weather of circumstance cannot extinguish, are not, in this framework, people who have been spared difficulty. They are people who have done something specific with their difficulty, who have turned toward their own darkness rather than from it, who have identified what was consuming their energy and learned, through the patient work of honest self-examination, to stop feeding it. They are, as the original insight that opens this conversation suggests, modern alchemists, not in the mystical sense, but in the most practical sense available. People who have learned to transform the raw material of their own inner life, their shadows, their fears, their unconscious patterns into something that serves rather than diminishes, into genuine, self-generated, internally sustainable energy. Today, we explore 5 principles of that transformation, 5 dimensions of what it actually means to be genuinely high energy, not as a performance, not as a mood, but as the expression of a psyche that has done the work of knowing itself. 1. The inner sun. Releasing the addiction to approval. The most fundamental characteristic shared by genuinely high energy people is this: they do not need someone else's light to feel warm. This sounds simple. In practice, it is among the most demanding psychological achievements available, because the need for external validation is not a superficial preference that can be revised by deciding to prefer otherwise. It is, for most people, a deeply embedded operating principle that was installed long before they were old enough to examine whether it served them. The mechanism works like this. From earliest childhood, we learn through the perfectly natural process of responding to the feedback of our environment, which versions of ourselves generate warmth and which generate withdrawal. We learn what earns the smile, the praise, the specific quality of parental approval that registers in the young nervous system as safety, and we organize ourselves, quite reasonably, around the production of those approved versions. By adulthood, this organization has become so thoroughly automatic that most people never experience themselves as being in its grip. It simply feels like caring about what others think, a normal, socially appropriate quality. But its practical consequences are profound and consistently underestimated. When your inner state is primarily regulated by external feedback, when your energy rises with the approving smile and falls with the critical glance, when the social media notification can shift your mood in a direction that stays shifted, you have effectively handed the control of your own energy to a committee you did not elect and cannot manage. The committee's membership changes constantly. Its verdicts are inconsistent. It has no particular interest in your well-being, no investment in your direction, and no awareness of what you are actually trying to build. And yet, for the person in the grip of approval, dependency, this committee's running commentary is the primary determinant of the quality of their inner life. The inner sun is the alternative, not the performance of indifference to others. Regard that as just another form of the same orientation, organized around the rejection of approval rather than its pursuit. But the genuine development of an inner climate that does not primarily depend on external input to sustain itself. This development is not achieved through willpower or through the decision to stop caring. It is built, gradually and through practice, from the inside out, from the specific rituals, mourning practices, creative engagements, physical disciplines, moments of genuine solitude that connect the person to their own inner source of replenishment. Not because these rituals produce approval or results that others will admire, but because they are genuinely nourishing, because they fill the cup that the approval-seeking was never quite able to fill. The full cup, in Jung's framework, is the natural condition of the person who has developed genuine inner sufficiency. And from that sufficiency, from the specific quality of presence that comes from someone whose energy is genuinely self-generating, something follows that no performance of confidence can replicate. The world responds differently to a full cup than to an empty one reaching outward, not because the full cup is trying to attract anything, but because genuine inner sufficiency has a quality that the human social environment, in its own instinctive way, recognizes and moves toward. 2. The art of the boundary, navigating the complaint swamp. Picture the people in your life who consistently drain you, not necessarily through obvious cruelty or deliberate hostility, though those exist, but through the specific, relentless quality of someone for whom every situation is a problem, every proposed solution a new obstacle, every interaction an opportunity to rehearse the comprehensive injustice of their circumstances. Jung identified the psychological mechanism underlying this pattern with characteristic precision. People who are in unacknowledged conflict with their own interior, who carry darkness they have not faced and pain they have not processed, tend to project that interior conflict outward. The complaint is not primarily about the external circumstances it appears to be about. It is about the inner life that is using external circumstances as a vehicle for expression. The world is unfair. The people are inadequate. The conditions are impossible because something inside is unresolved. And the inside is where the person cannot yet bear to look. Understanding this does not make the experience of sustained exposure to it more tolerable. The complaint swamp drains energy, regardless of whether you understand why it exists. And the genuinely high-energy person has learned something that most compassionate people find genuinely difficult: that the appropriate response to the complaint swamp is not to wade into it in an attempt to drain it. It is to find a path around it. This is not cruelty. It is not the abandonment of genuine care or the refusal of real support when real support is needed. There is an important distinction between someone who is in genuine difficulty and genuinely reaching for help, and someone who has organized their existence around the rehearsal of grievance in a way that is not oriented toward resolution, but toward the specific relief of having an audience for the complaint. The genuinely high-energy person has developed the discernment to distinguish between these two situations and the willingness to respond differently to each. Full presence and genuine support for the first, a respectful, warm, but clear navigation around the second. Jung's principle is the one that the airline industry arrived at independently and encapsulates in the oxygen mask instruction: secure your own supply before assisting others. This is not selfishness. It is the recognition that you cannot genuinely help anyone from a position of depletion. The person who has given away all their oxygen in the service of helping others breathe has not helped anyone. They have simply added themselves to the list of casualties. The boundary is not a wall. It is the discernment that allows you to remain genuinely available to the people and situations that genuinely warrant it, by refusing to allow your energy to be consumed by the situations that will take whatever is offered without ever reaching resolution. 3. The opportunity lens. Mental alchemy. Here is a claim worth examining carefully. No event is inherently good or bad. The event itself, the job loss, the relationship ending, the plan that collapsed, the door that closed, is neutral. What gives it its emotional quality, what determines whether it diminishes or develops us, is not the event but the interpretive frame through which we encounter it. Most people are not aware that they are wearing a frame. The interpretive process is so automatic, so instantaneous, so thoroughly preconscious, that the meaning seems to be a property of the event rather than a construction applied to it. The job loss is obviously devastating. The relationship ending is obviously a failure. These assessments feel like direct perceptions of reality because they arrive so quickly and with such certainty that the constructive process behind them is invisible. The high-energy person has not achieved some superhuman immunity to the initial sting of difficult events. They feel the impact, but through practice, through the deliberate cultivation of a specific orientation toward their own experience, they have developed what might be called a second response. The habit of asking, after the initial reaction has had its moment, a different question than the one the pain naturally generates. The natural question that difficulty generates is, why is this happening to me? This question is oriented backward and outward toward the injustice of the event, the unfairness of the circumstance, the culpability of whoever or whatever caused it. It is organized around the position of the victim, and it produces, with reliable consistency, the specific helplessness of someone who has placed the meaning of their experience entirely in the hands of external forces. The alternative question, the one that the high energy, the person has trained themselves to reach for, is, what is this trying to teach me? This question is oriented forward and inward. It takes the same difficult event and asks not what it means about the unfairness of the world, but what it offers in terms of information, development, or redirection. It positions the person not as the passive recipient of what the world is doing to them, but as an active learner in their own experience. This is mental alchemy in its most practical form. Not the denial of difficulty. The alchemist does not pretend the base metal is already gold, but the specific, practiced orientation toward what any material, however unpromising, might yield when worked with honest intelligence rather than abandoned in despair. The job that ended was not the right job. What does that tell you about the direction that might be? The relationship that concluded was not the right relationship. What does that reveal about what you actually need that it was not providing? The plan that collapsed had a flaw. What was the flaw, and what does understanding it make possible? These questions are not always answerable immediately. Sometimes the teaching of a difficult experience only becomes visible much later, in the specific way that its consequences turned out to redirect something important. But the habit of asking the question, the consistent, practiced orientation toward what an experience offers rather than only what it takes, changes the relationship to difficulty in ways that accumulate over time into a genuinely different quality of engagement with the texture of life. 4. The ghosts of the past and the freedom of forgiveness. There is a specific form of weight that never shows up on any scale and produces no visible symptoms in its early stages, but its effect on the energy available for present life is profound and entirely consistent. It is the weight of the unresolved past, the accumulated grievances, disappointments, and resentments that have not been processed and released, but are being carried forward, actively maintained, consuming the ongoing resource of the carrier's attention and emotional energy. Every experience of genuine injustice or genuine hurt that has not been metabolized, that has been stored rather than processed, continues to draw on the energy budget of the person carrying it, not occasionally, not only when deliberately recalled, but continuously, because the unresolved material is in the system. It colors perception, shapes interpretation, influences response, occupies the psychological bandwidth that would otherwise be available for genuine engagement with what is actually happening now. The high energy person has understood something about this that most people find genuinely counterintuitive. Carrying the weight does not address the injustice. It does not punish the person who caused the harm. It does not produce any outcome in the external world that is proportional to the internal cost of the carrying. It simply depletes the carrier continuously and without limit, in service of maintaining a grievance against someone who is, in most cases, entirely unaware that the grievance is being maintained. Forgiveness, in this framework, is not a moral virtue practiced for the benefit of the person who caused harm. It is a strategic act practiced entirely in service of the person forgiving. The decision to stop drinking the poison because you have finally acknowledged that it is not affecting the person who deserves to be affected, it is affecting you. The deliberate reclamation of the energy that resentment was consuming and its redirection toward the life that is actually happening now. This is not the forgiveness that pretends the harm did not occur. It is not the forgiveness that absolves the person who caused it or restores trust that has been genuinely broken. It is the much more self-interested act of deciding that the cost of continued resentment exceeds whatever satisfaction the resentment provides, and choosing, on that basis, to stop paying it. The high-energy person has graduated from the past. This does not mean the past is irrelevant. It is the source of genuine learning, of the specific wisdom that only experience can produce. But the past is a school, not a residence. You extract the education it offers, the genuine insights, the developed capacities, the specific self-knowledge that only difficulty produces, and you leave the building, taking with you what you learned, leaving behind what was never actually yours to carry indefinitely. The energy that returns when the weight is genuinely put down is one of the most surprising discoveries available in this work. Not the small, incremental gains of minor adjustments, but the significant, qualitative shift in available energy that occurs when a person has genuinely released something that was consuming a substantial and ongoing portion of their psychological resources. That released energy is not new energy. It was always there. It was simply being directed without anyone choosing for it to be directed there, at the maintenance of something that had already finished, redirected now toward the life that is still in progress. It feels like an arrival, like finally having access to something that was always present but never available. 5. The purpose compass and the playful mind. We arrive at the principle that holds everything else together, the one that gives all of the other qualities their direction and their sustainability. Viktor Frankl, whose work was deeply aligned with Jung's in its emphasis on meaning as the central human psychological need, observed from his experience in the concentration camps something that seems almost impossible, that the human being can endure almost anyhow if they have a sufficient why, that the presence of genuine purpose, a clear, felt, personally significant sense of what one's life is for, provides a quality of psychological resilience that no amount of technical coping strategy can replicate. Jung was equally direct about the cost of its absence. He considered meaninglessness the central psychological tragedy of modern life, the specific form of suffering that arises not from too much difficulty but from the absence of a genuine sense of what the difficulty is in service of. The person who knows what they are building can bear the storms that arise during the building. The person who does not know what they are building experiences the same storms as pointless punishment. The purpose compass does not require grandeur. It does not need to be a world historical mission or a uniquely significant contribution to human civilization. It needs, more essentially, to be genuine, to arise from honest contact with what actually matters to you, what you actually value, what kind of engagement with the world produces in you the specific sense of rightness that genuine alignment feels like. When that compass is present, when there is a genuine, felt orientation towards something that matters, the high energy person does not experience difficulties as evidence that the direction is wrong. They experience them as the ordinary, expected obstacles of anyone moving in a genuine direction, which produces a qualitatively different response. Not the demoralization of someone whose progress has been interrupted, but the problem-solving engagement of someone who knows where they are going and is simply working out the next part of how to get there. And this distinction is important, and it is one that purely serious, purely purposeful people often miss. The purpose compass does not require that life be lived with grim determination. The high-energy person has understood something that the earnest but joyless achiever has not, that the quality of energy available for any pursuit is significantly determined by the quality of relationship to the pursuit itself, and the quality of relationship that produces the most sustained, most renewable, most genuinely available energy is not duty or discipline or even commitment. It is play, not the absence of seriousness. The high-energy person takes their purpose genuinely seriously, but the specific quality of engagement that play represents, the orientation toward the activity itself rather than only toward its outcomes, the capacity to be genuinely absorbed in the process, to find the doing intrinsically interesting rather than purely instrumental, the willingness to experiment, to make mistakes, to encounter unexpected results with curiosity rather than catastrophizing. The child who plays is not less engaged than the adult who works. They are often more engaged, more present, more genuinely absorbed, more capable of the specific kind of sustained attention that the activity actually requires. And the high-energy person has maintained access to this quality past the age at which most adults lose it. The capacity to approach their own life with the specific, renewable, genuinely available energy of someone who finds what they are doing genuinely interesting. This combination, genuine purpose, which provides direction, and genuine playfulness, which provides fuel, is among the most powerful psychological configurations available. It is what makes the high-energy person's energy sustainable, rather than merely impressive. Purpose alone, without play, becomes a burden, the grim march toward a significant destination that was supposed to feel more meaningful than it does. Play alone, without purpose, becomes dissipation, the pleasant but ultimately unsatisfying expenditure of energy on nothing in particular. Together, they produce what the genuinely high-energy person embodies, the specific quality of someone who is moving in a direction that genuinely matters to them, with an engagement that they genuinely enjoy, from a source of energy that is genuinely self-replenishing. Not because life is easy for them, it is not, but because the relationship to life they have developed does not require life to be easy in order to produce genuine aliveness. We have explored today 5 principles of genuinely high energy, living not as a performance, not as a mood, but as the expression of a specific quality of inner development, the inner sun, the development of genuine self-generating energy that does not require others' approval to sustain itself. The boundary as discernment, the practiced capacity to distinguish between situations that warrant genuine engagement and those that would simply drain without resolution. The opportunity lends, the deliberate cultivation of the orientation that asks what any experience is offering rather than only what it is taking. The freedom of genuine forgiveness, the strategic reclamation of energy that resentment was consuming in service of a purpose it was not serving, and the purpose compass paired with the playful mind, the specific combination of genuine direction and genuine engagement that makes sustained aliveness possible. None of these qualities is achieved through a single decision or a single insight. They are built through the daily practice of choosing differently than the automatic, unconscious pull would have you choose, through the patient, often unglamorous work of knowing yourself more honestly, of clearing away what has been consuming your energy without your conscious choice to allocate it there, of developing an inner life that is genuinely worth inhabiting, insight that the darkness you have not met returns as fate points toward both the cost of unconsciousness and the reward of genuine self. The high-energy person is not someone who has been spared darkness. They are someone who has met it honestly, who has turned toward their shadows with the specific courage that genuine self-examination requires, and who has discovered, on the other side of that meeting, that the energy previously consumed in avoiding the darkness is now available for living. That energy is not exceptional. It is not the exclusive property of a gifted few. It is, in principle, available to anyone willing to do the work, the specific, personal, daily work of becoming someone who knows themselves well enough to stop giving their energy away to what does not deserve it, and to direct it instead toward what genuinely does. The inner sun is not born. It is built in the specific, patient, honest work of becoming genuinely, completely, irreducibly yourself. You are not looking for more energy. You are learning to stop wasting the energy you already have. That is enough to change everything.